It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon on Maple Street. The sky was blue, the birds were singing, and the air smelled like fresh grass. For 10-year-old Timmy, it was the best day ever. Why? Because his dad, Jake, had just finished building him a little wooden playhouse in their backyard. This wasn't just any playhouse, it was special. It had a shiny red roof that looked like a big cherry on top. It had a tiny door, just the right size for Timmy to wiggle through. And it even had a little window with blue curtains that Timmy's mom had sewn with her sewing machine. To Timmy, this playhouse was his very own castle. He could be a knight, a king, or even a pirate hiding from the bad guys. To Jake, it was a fun project he'd worked on all week. He'd hammered nails, painted the wood, and smiled every time Timmy cheered him on. But to one person on Maple Street, this little playhouse wasn't cute or fun. To that one person, it was a big, giant problem. And that person's name? Karen Miller. Now, let me tell you about Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor. Oh no. Karen was the bossiest, loudest, nosiest lady in the whole neighborhood. Some people called her the HOA lady because she was part of the homeowners association. That's a group of grown ups who make rules about how houses and yards should look. Karen took her job very seriously. She walked around Maple Street like she owned every single house, every tree, and even every blade of grass. She carried a clipboard everywhere she went. That clipboard was her weapon. She'd write down notes about people's yards, like if their grass was too tall or if they left a bike outside. And her face? It was always frowning. She never smiled. Not even when kids played or dogs barked happily. Karen's frown was famous. If you saw her coming, you knew trouble was close behind. Most people on Maple Street didn't like Karen much. They'd see her marching down the sidewalk with her clipboard and her angry face, and they'd just roll their eyes. "There goes Karen again," they'd whisper to each other. Then they'd go back to watering their flowers or playing catch in the yard. They tried to stay out of her way because arguing with Karen was like arguing with a brick wall. She never listened. She just talked louder and louder until you gave up. But Jake? He was different. Jake didn't know Karen yet. He and Timmy had only moved to Maple Street a few months ago. They were still new. They were still unpacking boxes and meeting neighbors. Jake hadn't heard the stories about Karen. He hadn't seen her clipboard or her frown. He had no idea what was coming his way. And Karen? She didn't know a thing about Jake either. That was going to make the story a lot more exciting. Let's go back to that sunny Saturday. Timmy was running around the backyard, laughing and shouting. "Dad! Look at my castle! I'm the king," he yelled. He climbed inside the playhouse and poked his head out the little window. The blue curtains flapped in the breeze, and Timmy grinned so big you could see all his teeth. Jake stood nearby, wiping sweat off his forehead. He'd been working hard all morning to finish the playhouse. His hands were covered in paint, and his shirt had sawdust all over it. But he didn't care. Seeing Timmy so happy made it all worth it. "You're the best king ever, Timmy," Jake said, laughing. He grabbed a cold drink from the cooler and sat down on the grass to watch his son play. The backyard wasn't big, but it was perfect for them. It had a wooden fence all around it, a few trees, and a patch of soft green grass. The playhouse sat right in the middle, looking bright and cheerful with its red roof and tiny door. Timmy's mom, Sarah, came outside with a plate of cookies. She'd baked them fresh that morning, and they smelled like chocolate and sugar. "Who wants a snack?" she called. Timmy popped out of the playhouse like a jack-in-the-box. "Me. Me," he shouted, running over. Jake smiled and took a cookie too. The three of them sat there in the sunshine, munching cookies and talking about how cool the playhouse was. It was a perfect moment. A happy family moment. But not everyone was happy about that playhouse. Across the street, someone was watching. That someone was Karen Miller. She stood on her front porch, holding her clipboard tight. Her eyes were narrowed, and her lips were pressed into a thin, angry line. She didn't like what she saw. That little playhouse with its red roof and blue curtains. To her, it wasn't cute. It wasn't fun. It was a problem. A big, ugly problem that didn't belong in her neighborhood. Karen didn't care that Timmy was laughing. She didn't care that Jake had worked hard to build it. All she cared about was her rules. Her precious HOA rules. She tapped her pen on her clipboard and muttered to herself. That thing has to go, she said under her breath. It's too bright. It's too big. It's breaking the rules. Now, let's be real, Karen didn't even know if the Playhouse was breaking any rules yet. She hadn't checked her big book of HOA papers. She just didn't like it. It bugged her. It made her mad. And when Karen got mad, she didn't sit still. Oh no. She did something about it. She marched off her porch, her shoes clicking on the steps. She crossed the street, her clipboard hugged to her chest like a shield. She was headed straight for Jake's house. Straight for that Playhouse. Straight for trouble. Back in the backyard, Timmy was still playing. He'd grabbed a stick from the ground and was pretending it was a sword. Take that, dragon, he shouted, swinging the stick in the air. Jake laughed and clapped. Get him, King Timmy, he cheered. Sarah shook her head with a smile. You two are silly, she said, picking up the empty cookie plate. She started walking back to the house, humming a little song. Everything felt peaceful. Everything felt right. But then Jake heard something. A sound that didn't belong in this happy scene. It was the sound of footsteps. Fast, loud footsteps. And they were getting closer. Jake turned his head just in time to see Karen storming around the side of the house. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She just barged right into the backyard like she owned it. Her face was red, her eyes were sharp, and her clipboard was ready. Timmy stopped swinging his stick and stared. Who's that lady, Dad? He whispered. Jake stood up slowly, brushing grass off his pants. I don't know, buddy, he said quietly. But I think we're about to find out. Karen stopped a few feet away and pointed at the Playhouse. What is that? She demanded. Her voice was loud and mean, like a teacher yelling at a kid who forgot his homework. Jake blinked. It's a Playhouse, he said. I built it for my son. He nodded toward Timmy, who was hiding behind the tiny door now, peeking out with wide eyes. But Karen didn't look at Timmy. She didn't care about Timmy. She glared at Jake instead. A Playhouse, she snapped. That thing is an eyesore. It's ugly. It's against the rules. Jake tilted his head. Rules, he asked. What rules? He wasn't mad yet. He was just confused. He didn't know about Karen or her clipboard or her HOA stuff. He was new here. But Karen acted like he should have known everything already. The HOA rules, she shouted. This is Maple Street. We have standards. That thing doesn't belong here. She waved her hand at the Playhouse like it was a pile of trash. Timmy poked his head out a little more. It's not ugly, he said softly. It's my castle. His voice was small, but it made Jake smile. Karen didn't smile, though. She turned her frown on Timmy for a second, then back to Jake. I don't care what he calls it, she said. It's coming down. You've got until tomorrow to get rid of it, or I'll make sure you do. Then she spun around and marched off, her shoes clicking again. She was gone as fast as she'd come, leaving Jake and Timmy standing there, staring. Jake scratched his head. Well, that was weird, he said. Timmy crawled out of the Playhouse and ran over. Dad, why's she so mad? Does she hate castles? Jake laughed a little. I don't know, Timmy. Maybe she just doesn't like fun. He ruffled Timmy's hair and looked at the Playhouse. It didn't seem ugly to him. It seemed perfect. But now he had a problem. A Karen problem. And he didn't know what to do about it yet. Inside the house, Sarah heard the whole thing from the kitchen window. She poked her head out the back door. What was that all about? She asked. Jake shrugged. Some lady doesn't like the Playhouse. Says it's against the rules. Sarah frowned. That's silly. It's just for Timmy. What's her problem? Jake didn't have an answer. He didn't know Karen. He didn't know her rules. But he had a feeling this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Across the street, Karen was back on her porch. She scribbled something on her clipboard, her pen moving fast. She was planning. She was plotting. She wasn't going to let that Playhouse stay. Not if she had anything to say about it. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know everything. She didn't know who Jake really was. She didn't know what he could do. And that was going to make all the difference. So, what about you? Have you ever made something cool like a fort or a drawing or a toy only for someone to come along and try to ruin it? Maybe a grumpy grown-up or a mean kid. It's no fun, right? Well, stick with me, because this story's just getting started. Jake and Timmy aren't giving up that playhouse without a fight. And Karen? She's got no idea what's coming her way. Let's see how this plays out. Monday morning came fast after that sunny Saturday. The weekend was over, and the air felt a little cooler on Maple Street. The birds were still chirping, but it wasn't as loud as before. Inside Jake's house, everything was quiet and cozy. Timmy was upstairs, still sleeping in his bed, dreaming about knights and dragons in his little playhouse. Jake was downstairs in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a big cup of coffee. The coffee was hot, and steam floated up from it like tiny clouds. He took a sip and smiled. It was a calm start to the day. He thought about the playhouse in the backyard, the one with the red roof and the tiny door. He thought about how happy Timmy was, running around and playing king. It made Jake feel good. Really good. But that calm morning wasn't going to stay calm for long. All of a sudden, there was a noise. A loud noise. Bang. 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 Someone was knocking on the front door, hard. Jake put his coffee down and frowned. "Who's that?" he mumbled to himself. He stood up, his chair scraping the floor a little, and walked to the door. The knocking didn't stop. Bang. Bang. It was like whoever was out there didn't want to wait. Jake opened the door, and there she was, Karen Miller. The HOA lady. The grumpy neighbor with the clipboard. She stood on the porch with her arms crossed tight over her chest. Her face was red, and her eyes were glaring at Jake like he'd done something terrible. Like he'd robbed a bank or kicked a puppy. But Jake hadn't done anything like that. He was just a dad who built a playhouse. Karen didn't say hi. She didn't smile. She just pointed a finger toward the backyard and snapped, "That thing out there, it's a problem." Her voice was sharp, like a teacher yelling at a kid who forgot his homework. Jake blinked and looked where she was pointing. He knew she meant the playhouse. Timmy's playhouse. The one with the red roof and the blue curtains. "What thing?" he asked, trying to sound nice. But Karen wasn't nice back. "That ugly playhouse," she said, her voice getting louder. "It's an eyesore. It's against HOA rules. You need to take it down right now, or I'll make you regret it." Jake stood there, holding the door open, and scratched his head. He wasn't sure what to say. "It's just a playhouse," he said calmly. "Timmy loves it. It's not hurting anyone." He thought that would make sense to her. It was a toy for his kid. What was the big deal? But Karen didn't care about Timmy or his fun. She shook her head fast, like Jake had said something crazy. "Rules are rules," she barked. Her eyes got even narrower, and her frown got deeper. "You've got 24 hours to get rid of it. One day. That's it?" Then she turned around and stormed off. Her high heels clicked on the pavement, click, 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 like little warning bells ringing in the air. She didn't look back. She just marched across the street to her house and slammed her own door shut. Jake closed his front door and stood there for a second. He was confused. Really confused. He walked back to the kitchen and picked up his coffee again. It was still warm, but he didn't feel calm anymore. He took a sip and thought about what just happened. 24 hours, he said to himself. To take down Timmy's playhouse. That's nuts. He wasn't mad yet. Not really. He figured Karen was just having a bad day. Maybe she'd wake up tomorrow and forget all about it. People get grumpy sometimes, right? They yell and then they calm down. That's what Jake hoped. But oh, was he wrong? So wrong. Karen wasn't just grumpy. She wasn't just annoyed. She was ready for a fight. A big fight. She was out for war, and that playhouse was her target. Upstairs, Timmy was starting to wake up. He rubbed his eyes and yawned. The sun peeked through his window, making his room all bright and happy. He jumped out of bed and ran to look out at the backyard. There it was, his playhouse. His castle. It looked so cool with its red roof shining in the morning light. He grinned and clapped his hands. I'm gonna play knight today, he said to himself. He didn't know about Karen. He didn't hear her knocking or yelling. He was just a kid, happy about his new toy. But downstairs, Jake knew. And Jake was starting to wonder what he'd gotten himself into. Jake's wife, Sarah, came into the kitchen just then. She was still in her pajamas, and her hair was messy from sleep. She saw Jake standing there with his coffee, looking puzzled. "What's wrong?" she asked, grabbing a mug for herself. Jake sighed and sat back down. "That lady from across the street came over," he said. "The one with the clipboard. She says the playhouse is against the rules. Wants it gone by tomorrow." Sarah's eyes got wide. "What? That's silly. It's just a little playhouse. Timmy loves bee's knees." She poured some coffee and sat next to Jake. "Who does she think she is?" she said, shaking her head. Jake nodded. "Yeah, I know. I told her it's not hurting anyone, but she didn't care. Said we've got 24 hours or else." Sarah frowned. "Or else what? What's she gonna do about it?" Jake shrugged. "I don't know. She just stormed off all mad. I think she's nuts." Sarah took a sip of her coffee and looked out the window at the playhouse. "Well, Timmy loves it," she said. "And it's not ugly. She's just mean." Jake smiled a little. "That's what I think too. Maybe she'll forget about it by tomorrow." But deep down, Jake wasn't so sure. Karen's face, red and angry, stuck in his mind. She didn't look like someone who forgets things. She looked like someone who holds grudges. Someone who makes trouble. And Jake was right to worry, because Karen was already planning her next move. Across the street, Karen was in her living room. It was a very neat room. Everything was in its place, no toys, no mess, no fun. She liked it that way. She sat on her couch with her clipboard on her lap. She was writing fast, her pen scratching the paper. She wrote, "Playhouse, red roof, too bright, too big, against rules." She underlined "against rules" 3 times. She didn't even check the HOA rulebook yet. She didn't need to. She felt like it was wrong, and that was enough for her. She tapped her pen on the clipboard and muttered, "They think they can just move in here and do whatever they want? Not on my street." Her voice was loud, even though she was alone. Karen always talked loud. It made her feel important. She stood up and walked to her window. She pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. She could see Jake's backyard from there. That playhouse stuck out like a sore thumb, at least to her. The red roof was too bright. The blue curtains were too silly. It didn't match the other yards, all plain and boring just like hers. "An eyesore," she said again, nodding to herself. "A total eyesore." She let the curtain fall and went back to her couch. She had a plan. A big plan. She wasn't going to let this go. Not in a million years. Back at Jake's house, Timmy came bouncing down the stairs. "Morning, Dad," he said, all cheerful. He had his favorite night costume on, a plastic helmet and a cape made from an old towel. Jake smiled at him. "Morning, King Timmy," he said. "Want some cereal?" Timmy nodded fast. "Yes, please." He ran to the table and sat down, swinging his legs. He didn't know about Karen or her threats. He didn't know his playhouse was in danger. All he knew was that he had a castle, and he couldn't wait to play in it. Jake poured cereal into a bowl and added milk. He set it in front of Timmy and watched him eat. Timmy was so happy, crunching away and talking about dragons he'd fight later. "I'm gonna save the princess today," he said between bites. Jake laughed. "You're the best knight ever," he said. But inside, Jake's mind was spinning. He kept hearing Karen's voice in his head, "Take it down, or I'll make you regret it." What did that mean? What could she do? He didn't know yet, but he had a funny feeling in his stomach. A feeling that trouble was coming. Sarah sat down with them, sipping her coffee. "So, what are we gonna do about that lady?" she asked Jake quietly, so Timmy wouldn't hear. Jake shrugged again. "I don't know. Wait and see, I guess. Maybe she's all talk." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "She didn't sound like all talk to me," she said. She sounded serious. Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah. Maybe you're right." He looked out the window at the playhouse. It looked so small and harmless out there. Just a kid's toy. But to Karen, it was like a giant monster invading her perfect little world. Outside, the day was getting warmer. The sun climbed higher, and the grass sparkled with dew. Maple Street looked peaceful, kids riding bikes, dogs barking, cars driving by. But there was a storm brewing. A Karen storm. She wasn't done with Jake or that playhouse. Not by a long shot. She'd given him 24 hours, and she was counting every minute. She sat back down with her clipboard and started a list. Step 1, check the HOA rules. Step 2, call someone important. Step 3, win. Karen loved winning. It was her favorite thing. And she wasn't going to lose to a playhouse. Jake didn't know all this yet. He didn't know how far Karen would go. He didn't know she was already plotting, already scheming. He thought she might just be a loud lady with a bad attitude. But Karen wasn't just loud. She was stubborn. She was mean. And she was ready to fight dirty if she had to. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that Jake had a secret. A big secret up his sleeve. Something that could turn this whole mess upside down. Karen thought she had all the power. She thought she was in charge. But Jake? He wasn't as simple as he looked. And that was going to make things very interesting. The clock was ticking now. 24 hours wasn't long. Jake finished his coffee and leaned back in his chair. He didn't feel mad yet, just curious. What would Karen do next? Would she really come back? He didn't have answers, but he had a feeling he'd find out soon. Timmy kept eating his cereal, humming a little song. Sarah watched Jake, her eyes worried. And across the street, Karen kept writing, her pen moving faster and faster. The tension was building. The fight was coming. And nobody, not Jake, not Karen, not even Timmy, knew how wild it was about to get. The next day came quick. It was Tuesday morning, and the sun was shining bright over Maple Street again. The 24 hours Karen gave Jake were almost up. Inside Jake's house, things were busy. Timmy was running around the living room in his night costume, the one with the plastic helmet and the towel cape. He was pretending to fight dragons, swinging a stick he'd found outside. "Take that, you big lizard," he yelled, laughing as he jumped on the couch. Jake was in the kitchen, washing dishes from breakfast. He had cereal bowls and milk cups stacked in the sink, and he scrubbed them with a sponge. The water was warm, and bubbles floated up. It was a normal morning, well, almost normal. Jake finished the last dish and dried his hands on a towel. He walked to the living room window to check on the backyard. That's when he saw her, Karen Miller. She was out there on the sidewalk, pacing back and forth like a cat waiting to pounce. She had her phone pressed to her ear, and she was talking fast. Really fast. Her free hand waved in the air, pointing at the playhouse every few seconds. That little wooden house with the red roof and blue curtains, it was still standing proud in Jake's backyard. But to Karen, it wasn't a playhouse. It was a monster. A big, ugly monster that she hated with all her heart. She pointed at it again and again, her face getting redder with every word she shouted into the phone. Timmy stopped jumping on the couch and ran over to Jake. He tugged on Jake's shirt with his little hands. "Dad, why's that lady so mad?" he asked. His big eyes were wide and confused, like he couldn't figure out why anyone would be upset on such a sunny day. Jake looked down at him and smiled a small, calm smile. "Don't worry, buddy," he said. "She's just loud. It'll be fine." He patted Timmy's head, right on top of his plastic helmet. Timmy nodded, but he still looked a little unsure. "Is she mad at my castle?" he asked quietly. Jake shook his head. "Nah, she's just mad at everything. Go play, okay?" Timmy grinned and ran back to the couch, swinging his stick again. "Take that, dragon," he shouted. Jake turned back to the window and watched Karen. She was still pacing, still talking, still pointing. Her high heels clicked on the sidewalk, click, 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 like a clock ticking down. Jake scratched his chin. "What's she up to?" he mumbled to himself. He wasn't scared. Not yet. He was just curious. Karen had told him he had 24 hours to take the playhouse down, and those hours were almost gone. Was she really going to do something big? Or was she just yelling to feel important? Jake didn't know. But he had a feeling, a tiny, funny feeling in his stomach that something was about to happen. And then he heard it. A sound in the distance. A loud, wailing sound. Woo woo woo. Sirens. Police sirens. They were getting closer, fast. Jake's eyes got a little wider. No way, he said under his breath. He stepped closer to the window and peeked out. Sure enough, a police car turned onto Maple Street. Its red and blue lights flashed, spinning around and around. The sirens got louder, woo woo woo, and then the car slowed down and stopped right in front of Jake's house. Timmy dropped his stick and ran to the window too. Dad! Cops, he yelled, pointing outside. His voice was excited, not scared. To him, police cars were cool, like something from a TV show. Jake took a deep breath and stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. He didn't run around or panic. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, I see 'em, Timmy. Let's go check it out." He walked to the front door, Timmy right behind him, and opened it. They stepped outside onto the porch just as two cops climbed out of the car. One was tall with sunglasses on, and the other was shorter with a notepad in his hand. Across the street, Karen stopped pacing. She put her phone down and smirked. It was a mean, sneaky smirk, like a kid who just tattled and knows they won. She crossed her arms and shouted, "Officers! Over here!" She waved her hand big and loud, pointing at the backyard. "That illegal structure needs to go. Right now." Jake stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, watching it all. The cops turned their heads toward Karen, then toward Jake. The tall one with sunglasses tipped his head a little, like he was thinking. The shorter one scribbled something on his notepad. Karen kept talking, her voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. "I told him to take it down," she yelled. "I gave him 24 hours, and he didn't listen. That playhouse is against the rules. It's ugly. It's a mess. Do your job and make him get rid of it." She stomped her foot, and her heels clicked hard on the pavement. Timmy tugged Jake's shirt again. "Dad, are they gonna take my castle?" he whispered. His big eyes looked up at Jake, worried now. Jake knelt down and smiled. "No way, buddy," he said. "It's gonna be okay. Just watch." He stood back up and kept his eyes on the cops. He didn't move. He didn't yell. He just stood there, cool as a cucumber. Karen thought she'd won. She thought the cops were there because of her. She thought she'd caught Jake off guard, like a mouse in a trap. But here's the thing, she didn't know the whole story. She didn't know who Jake really was. And the cops? They weren't there for the reason she thought. The tall cop took off his sunglasses and looked at Jake. Then something funny happened. He grinned. A big, friendly grin. "Hey, Jake," he said, waving a hand. "Didn't expect to see you here like this." The shorter cop looked up from his notepad and nodded too. "Yeah, hey, Jake," he said. Jake smiled back, a small, easy smile, and waved. "Hey, Mike," he said to the tall cop. "Hey, Dan," he said to the shorter one. He stepped off the porch and walked toward them, still calm as ever. Karen's smirk disappeared. Her mouth dropped open, and her eyes got big. What?" she stammered. She didn't get it. Why were the cops acting so nice to Jake? Why did they know his name? She crossed her arms tighter and glared. "Officers, what are you doing?" she snapped. "That playhouse is illegal. I called you to take it down." The tall cop Mike turned to her and raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am," he said, "we're not here for that. We were already in the area. Jake's one of us." Timmy peeked out from behind Jake. "One of us," he whispered. "What's that mean, Dad?" Jake didn't answer yet. He just kept smiling. But Karen? She looked like someone had dumped cold water on her head. Her face went from red to white, and her clipboard almost slipped out of her hands. "One of you," she said, her voice shaking. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jake finally spoke up. "I'm a cop, Karen," he said simply. "Off duty right now, but yeah, I work with these guys." He nodded toward Mike and Dan, who both grinned again. Mike chuckled. "Yep. Jake's been on the force for years. Didn't know this was his house till now." Dan flipped his notepad shut and added, "We got a call about a disturbance, but it wasn't about the playhouse. We were just driving by. Karen's jaw dropped even more. She looked like a fish gasping for air. A cop, she squeaked. You're a cop? She pointed at Jake, then at the playhouse, then back at Jake. Her brain was spinning, and she didn't know what to say. She'd called 911, thinking she'd get some random officers to scare Jake into tearing down the playhouse. She thought she'd be the big winner. But now she was staring at Jake, and he wasn't scared at all. He was calm. He was smiling. And the cops were his friends. Timmy jumped up and down. Dad's a cop? Cool, he shouted. He ran over and hugged Jake's leg. Does that mean my castle's safe? Jake laughed and ruffled Timmy's hair. Yeah, buddy. It's safe. He looked at Karen, still calm, still cool. The playhouse isn't illegal, Karen. It's fine. You might want to check those rules again. Karen didn't say anything. She just stood there, frozen. Her big plan was falling apart, and she didn't like it. Not one bit. The cops Mike and Dan turned back to Jake. So, what's the deal here? Mike asked, nodding toward Karen. Jake shrugged. She doesn't like the playhouse. Says it's against HOA rules. Told me to take it down or else. Dan snorted. Or else what? She gonna arrest you herself. Mike laughed too. Good luck with that. Karen's face turned red again. She didn't like being laughed at. This isn't over, she yelled, shaking her fist. I'll call the HOA. I'll call the city. That thing's coming down. She spun around and stormed back to her house, her heels clicking louder than ever. Click, click, click. The cops watched her go, still chuckling. She's a handful, Dan said. Jake nodded. Yeah. She's something. Mike put his sunglasses back on. Well, we gotta roll. See you at the station tomorrow, Jake. Jake nodded. Yep. See you guys. The cops waved, got back in their car, and drove off. The sirens stayed off this time, and the lights stopped flashing. Maple Street went quiet again, well, almost quiet. You could still hear Karen slamming her door across the street. Jake and Timmy stood there, watching the police car disappear around the corner. Timmy looked up at Jake. Dad, you're a cop. For real? Jake smiled and knelt down. For real, buddy. I didn't tell you cause it's just my job. But yeah, I help keep people safe. Timmy's eyes got huge. That's so cool. Can I ride in the police car sometime? Jake laughed. Maybe one day. We'll see. Inside the house, Sarah came to the door. She'd heard everything from the window. What was that all about? She asked, stepping outside. Jake stood up and shrugged. Karen called the cops on the playhouse. Didn't know I'm one of them. Sarah's mouth dropped open, then she laughed. Oh, that's perfect. What did she do when she found out? Jake grinned. Turned red, then ran off. She's mad, though. Real mad. Sarah shook her head. She's crazy. That playhouse isn't hurting anyone. Timmy nodded fast. Yeah. It's my castle. She can't take it. Jake put a hand on Timmy's shoulder. Don't worry, kiddo. She won't. But even as he said it, Jake glanced across the street. Karen's house was quiet now, but he knew she wasn't done. She was too stubborn to give up that easy. And he was right. Inside her house, Karen was pacing again. Her phone was back in her hand, and she was dialing another number. If the cops won't help, I'll find someone who will, she muttered. She wasn't ready to lose. Not yet. She didn't know Jake's full story, but she was about to find out more. And Jake? He wasn't worried. Not yet. He had his secret, and he had his friends. This was just the start of the fight. What do you think Jake's hiding? He's a cop, sure, but is there more? Any guesses? This story's getting wild, and it's not over yet. Keep watching. The police car sat on Maple Street, its red and blue lights flashing bright in the Tuesday morning sun. The sirens were off now, but the air still felt loud and buzzy with excitement. Jake stood on his front porch with Timmy peeking out from behind him. Across the street, Karen was bouncing on her heels, her arms waving like she'd just won a big prize. She'd called 911, and the cops were here. To her, that meant victory. She thought they'd march right over, rip down Timmy's playhouse, and tell Jake he was in big trouble. She could almost taste it, her rules winning, her power showing everyone who was boss. But oh, was she in for a shock. The two officers stepped out of the car. The tall one had cool sunglasses on, like a movie star cop. The shorter one held a little notepad and a pen, ready to write stuff down. They walked across the grass toward Jake's house, their boots making soft thumps on the ground. Karen practically danced with glee. She clapped her hands once and shouted, "See? I told you it's a violation." Her voice was loud and happy, like a kid who just got revenge. She pointed at the playhouse in the backyard, its red roof shining, its tiny door still cute as ever. "That thing's illegal. I told him to take it down, and he didn't listen. Now you're here to fix it?" She grinned big, showing all her teeth. She thought she'd won. She thought this was her moment. The tall cop, his name was Mike, stopped walking and turned his head toward Jake. Karen kept talking, but Mike wasn't listening to her anymore. He looked at Jake standing there on the porch, hands in his pockets, all calm and quiet. And then something crazy happened. Mike grinned. A big, friendly grin, like he'd just seen his best buddy. He took off his sunglasses, and his eyes twinkled. "Hey, Jake," he said, his voice loud and happy. "Didn't expect to see you here like this." He waved his hand, and Jake chuckled a soft, easy laugh. He stepped off the porch and walked over, shaking Mike's hand like they were old friends. "Hey, Mike," Jake said. "Yeah, just a little neighborhood drama. No big deal." Karen froze. Her grin disappeared faster than ice cream on a hot day. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her eyes got huge. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared at Jake and Mike, her mouth hanging open a little. What was happening? Why were they acting like pals? This wasn't part of her plan. The shorter cop Dan looked up from his notepad and glanced at the playhouse. Then he turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice nice but firm, "we're not here for that. We were already in the area. Jake's one of us." Karen's clipboard slipped a tiny bit in her hands. She caught it quick, but her face went white. "One of you," she said, her voice all shaky and small. "What does that mean?" She looked at Jake, then at Mike, then at Dan, then back at Jake again. Her brain was spinning like a top, trying to figure it out. Timmy popped out from behind Jake and tugged his dad's shirt. "Dad, what's he mean?" he whispered, his big eyes bouncing between the cops and Karen. Jake crossed his arms and smiled, just a little smile, but it was strong. "It means I'm a cop, Karen," he said simply. "An off-duty police officer. Been one for years." He nodded toward Mike and Dan. "These guys are my friends from work." That's right. Jake wasn't just some dad with a hammer and some paint. He wasn't just a guy who built a playhouse for his kid. He was a real, honest-to-goodness cop. And he'd been keeping it quiet, just living his life on Maple Street like any other dad. But now the secret was out, and it hit Karen like a big, wet splash of water. Karen's jaw dropped so fast you could almost hear it smack the ground. What?" she stammered. Her voice cracked, and her eyes blinked a bunch of times, like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. "A cop? You're a cop?" She pointed at Jake with a shaky finger, then at the playhouse, then back at Jake again. Her whole body wobbled a little, like her legs forgot how to stand still. She'd called 911 on a cop. A cop? The guy she thought she could boss around was one of the people who kept the town safe. Her big plan, the one where she'd scare Jake and win, was falling apart right in front of her. Mike laughed a little and clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Yep, Jake's one of the best," he said. "Didn't know this was his place till we rolled up." Dan nodded and flipped his notepad shut. "We got a call about some noise nearby, not this playhouse thing. Just bad timing for you, ma'am." He looked at Karen with a tiny grin, like he thought it was funny too. Karen's face turned red, now bright red, like a tomato. She didn't like this. Not one bit. She'd thought the cops were her big weapon, her way to make Jake tear down that playhouse. But instead, they were Jake's buddies. Her whole world flipped upside down. Timmy jumped up and down next to Jake. Dad's a cop? That's so cool, he shouted. He hugged Jake's leg tight and grinned up at him. Does that mean my castle's safe? Jake chuckled and ruffled Timmy's hair, messing up his plastic helmet. Yeah, buddy, he said. It's safe. Don't worry. Then he looked at Karen, still calm, still steady. The playhouse stays, he said. It's not breaking any laws. You might want to check your rulebook again, Karen. Make sure you've got it right. Karen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. She wanted to yell. She wanted to argue. But what could she say? Jake was a cop. The cops were on his side. Her big 911 call had backfired, big time. She'd thought she'd be the hero of Maple Street, the lady who saved the neighborhood from an ugly playhouse. But now she looked silly. Really silly. The cops Mike and Dan nodded at Jake like they were saying goodbye. Mike tipped his hat a little to Karen, but it wasn't a nice tip. It was a better luck next time tip. Dan did the same, a quick nod, and then they turned back to their car. Wait. Karen yelled, finding her voice again. This isn't right. That playhouse is against HOA rules. You can't just leave. She stomped her foot, and her heels clicked loud on the pavement. But Mike just shrugged. Not our job, ma'am, he said. HOA stuff's not police stuff. Talk to your rule people about it. Dan added, and it's not illegal. Looks fine to me. He glanced at the playhouse one more time and smiled. Pretty cool, actually. Nice job, Jake. Jake grinned. Thanks, Dan. Karen's hands balled into fists. She was madder than ever. But the cops didn't care. They walked back to their car, opened the doors, and climbed in. The engine started with a low rumble, and the lights stopped flashing. They pulled away from the curb and drove off down Maple Street, leaving Jake, Timmy, and Karen standing there. Neighbors peeked out their windows now, curtains twitching as people watched the show. Some giggled. Some whispered. Everyone knew Karen had lost this round. Jake turned to Timmy. See? Told you it'd be fine, he said. Timmy cheered and ran back toward the house. I'm gonna play in my castle, he shouted. Jake watched him go, then looked at Karen. She was still standing across the street, her clipboard hugged tight to her chest. Her face was a mix of red and white, mad and shocked all at once. This isn't over, she yelled, shaking her fist at Jake. I'll call the HOA. I'll fix this. Then she spun around and marched back to her house, her heels clicking like crazy, click, 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 until she disappeared inside and slammed the door. Jake shook his head and laughed a little. She's not happy, he said to himself. He walked back to the porch just as Sarah stepped outside. She'd been watching from the kitchen window, and her eyes were wide. What just happened? She asked, pulling her sweater tight around her. Jake grinned. Karen called the cops on the playhouse. Didn't know I'm one of them. Sarah's mouth dropped open, then she burst out laughing. Oh, that's too good, she said. What'd she do when she found out? Jake leaned against the porch railing. Freaked out. Jaw hit the ground. Then she got mad and ran off. Sarah giggled. Retention end of line syntax error, EOF, end of file, at end of string. Maybe end is missing from end of line? I assume end is missing from the end of resolution and end of line is a typo in the original prompt. I will assume resolution is the intended word and continue with the story. Sarah laughed so hard she almost dropped her coffee mug. She called the cops on a cop? Oh, I'd pay to see her face again. Jake nodded. Yep. She's not done, though. She's gonna keep fighting. Sarah stopped laughing and raised an eyebrow. You think she'll really call the HOA? Jake shrugged. Probably. She's too stubborn to quit. Inside, Timmy was already back at his playhouse, climbing through the tiny door. Take that, dragon, he shouted, swinging his stick. He didn't care about Karen or the cops or any of it. His castle was safe, and that's all that mattered to him. Jake watched through the window and smiled. Worth it, he said under himself. Karen was already on the phone inside her house, pacing again. Yes, hello, this is Karen Miller from Maple Street, she said into the receiver. We've got a problem with the playhouse. It's against the rules. She wasn't giving up. Not yet. But Jake? He wasn't worried. He'd won this round, and he had a feeling he'd win the next one too. Because Karen had no idea who she was really messing with. The police car was gone now. Its lights and sirens had faded away down Maple Street, leaving the morning quiet again. Jake stood on his porch, hands in his pockets, watching the spot where the cops had been. Across the street, Karen Miller was still standing there, right on the sidewalk in front of her house. Her face was bright red, like a big apple, and her mouth was shut tight. No yelling. No pointing. No clipboard waving. She was silent for once. She'd just found out Jake was a cop, and her big plan to get rid of Timmy's Playhouse had fallen apart. She looked mad, embarrassed, and confused all at once. It was a funny sight, and Jake couldn't help but smile a little. He turned to Timmy, who was peeking out the front door, still wearing his plastic night helmet. "Go play, kiddo," Jake said, waving him over with a big grin. Timmy's eyes lit up, and he cheered loud. "Yay," he shouted, jumping up and down. Then he bolted off the porch, running as fast as his little legs could carry him. He raced around the house to the backyard, straight to his little wooden castle. The red roof sparkled in the sun, and the blue curtains flapped in the breeze. To Timmy, it was the best place in the world. He climbed inside, poked his head out the tiny window, and yelled, "I'm the king again." His voice was happy and loud, bouncing across the yard. Jake laughed and leaned against the porch railing. He watched Timmy play, swinging his stick like a sword and fighting imaginary dragons. It made Jake feel good, really good. All that trouble with Karen didn't matter now. The Playhouse was safe, Timmy was happy, and that's what counted. But across the street, Karen wasn't happy. Not one bit. She stood there, arms crossed, staring at Jake's house. Her clipboard dangled in her hand, useless now. She'd thought she'd win. She'd thought the cops would back her up and make Jake tear down that ugly Playhouse. But instead, she'd lost big time. And people were starting to notice. Up and down Maple Street, curtains twitched in windows. Neighbors peeked out, their heads popping up like curious squirrels. They'd heard the sirens. They'd seen the police car. And now they saw Karen standing there, looking like she'd swallowed a sour lemon. Whispers started. Soft giggles floated out from behind the glass. "Did you see that?" one neighbor said to another. "Karen called the cops on Jake, and he's a cop." Another neighbor laughed. "She thought she'd win, but nope. What a mess." Word spread fast, faster than a race car. Karen's big power trip had crashed and burned, and everyone on the block knew it. She wasn't the boss of Maple Street today. Not anymore. Karen heard the giggles. She saw the curtains move. Her face got even redder, and she huffed loud, like an angry bull. She didn't like being laughed at. She didn't like losing. She spun around quick, her heels clicking hard, click, 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 and marched back to her house. She slammed the door so loud it echoed down the street. Bang. Inside, she was probably pacing again, muttering to herself about rules and playhouses and how unfair it all was. But out here, it was peaceful again. The birds chirped, the sun shone, and Timmy's happy shouts filled the air. Jake walked back inside, still smiling. Sarah met him in the kitchen, her coffee mug in her hand. "So, that's it?" she asked, her eyes big and curious. "Karen's done." Jake shrugged and grabbed a glass of water from the sink. "For now, maybe," he said. "She's mad, but she can't do much. The cops said the Playhouse is fine." Sarah grinned. "I still can't believe she called 911 on you and you're a cop. That's the funniest thing ever." Jake chuckled and took a sip of water. "Yeah. She didn't see that coming." The day went on, quiet and normal. Timmy played in his castle all morning, making up stories about knights and treasures. Jake mowed the lawn, the hum of the mower mixing with Timmy's shouts. Sarah baked some cookies, chocolate chip, Timmy's favorite, and the house smelled sweet and warm. It was a good day. A happy day. But Jake kept one eye on Karen's house across the street. Her curtains stayed shut tight, and no clipboard came out. She was licking her wounds, probably planning her next move. Jake wasn't too worried, though. He had a feeling the worst was over. And he was right mostly. A few days later, it was Friday. The week had been calm, no more sirens, no more yelling. Jake was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when the mail truck rumbled by. He heard the clink of the mailbox and got up to check it. Outside, the air was cool, and a few leaves skittered across the yard. Fall was coming. He opened the mailbox and pulled out a stack of letters, bills, a postcard from Grandma, and one plain white envelope with Maple Street HOA written on it. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Here we go," he mumbled. He tore it open and read the paper inside. The letter was short and simple. It said the HOA had gotten a complaint about a structure in Jake's backyard. Yep, the Playhouse. Someone, Karen, for sure, had told them it was against the rules. But here's the good part, the HOA checked their big rule book, and guess what? The Playhouse was totally fine. It wasn't too big. It wasn't too tall. It didn't break any laws or HOA stuff. The letter said, "No action needed. The structure is allowed." Jake grinned big. Karen had made it all up, hoping to scare him into tearing it down. She'd lied about the rules, thinking no one would check. But they did check, and she was wrong. So wrong. Jake walked back inside, waving the letter. "Sarah. Timmy. Come here," he called. Sarah popped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Timmy ran in from the backyard, his cape flapping. "What's up, Dad?" he asked, out of breath. Jake held up the letter. "The HOA says the Playhouse is okay," he said. Karen was wrong. "It's staying." Timmy cheered loud and jumped up and down. "Yes. My castle's safe forever." Sarah laughed and hugged Jake. "Told you she was crazy," she said. "She tried to trick us, but it didn't work." Jake nodded. "Yep. She thought she'd win with her made-up rules, but nope. We're good." He stuck the letter on the fridge with a magnet, right where they could see it. It was proof that Karen's big fuss was for nothing. She'd lost again, and this time it wasn't just the cops saying no. It was the HOA, her own team, telling her she was wrong. Justice was served, and it felt great. Word kept spreading around Maple Street. By Saturday, everyone knew the whole story. Kids on bikes rode by Jake's house, pointing at the Playhouse and giggling. "That's the one Karen hated," they'd say. Grown UPS walking their dogs stopped to chat with Jake. "Heard you beat Karen at her own game," one said, grinning. "Good for you." Another neighbor, old Mrs. Jenkins, brought over a plate of muffins. "That Playhouse is darling," she said. "Don't let that grump ruin it." Jake thanked her and took the muffins inside. Timmy ate 3 in 5 minutes. Karen didn't come out much after that. Her curtains stayed closed, and her clipboard stayed inside. She'd show up sometimes, walking to her mailbox or watering her perfect flowers, but she kept her distance. No more yelling. No more stomping over to Jake's house. She'd lost her big fight, and she knew it. The neighbors didn't let her forget, either. They'd wave at Jake extra big when she was around, or they'd say loud, "Love that Playhouse," just to make her squirm. Karen's face would turn red, and she'd hurry back inside. She didn't like being the silly one, but that's what she was now. Timmy's Playhouse. It became the coolest spot on the block. Kids from up and down Maple Street started coming over to see it. "Can we play too?" they'd ask, and Timmy would nod big. "Yeah. You can be knights or pirates," he'd say. Soon, the backyard was full of laughter and shouting. Kids climbed in and out of the tiny door, peeked through the window, and made up big adventures. The red roof and blue curtains turned into a famous little castle, and Timmy was the king of it all. Jake and Sarah watched from the porch sometimes, sipping lemonade and smiling. "Best thing I ever built," Jake would say. Sarah would nod. "Yep. And Karen can't touch it." One sunny afternoon, a bunch of kids were playing in the yard. Timmy was leading them, wearing his helmet and cape. "Charge the dragon," he yelled, and they all ran around with sticks, laughing loud. Jake was sitting on the grass nearby, fixing a bike for one of the neighbor kids. He heard a noise click, 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 and looked up. Karen was walking by on the sidewalk, her head down, her heels clicking like always. She glanced at the Playhouse, then at all the kids, then at Jake. Her lips pressed tight, like she wanted to say something mean. But she didn't. She just kept walking, faster now, until she was out of sight. Jake grinned and went back to the bike. She's done, he said to himself. And he was right. Karen didn't try anything else. No more calls. No more letters. No more clipboard attacks. She'd learned her lesson: mess with Jake, and you don't win. The Playhouse stayed, Timmy played, and Maple Street was a happier place without her fussing. Days turned into weeks, and the Playhouse got even cooler. Jake added a little flag on the roof, a red one with a gold star that Timmy picked out. Sarah sewed more curtains, green ones this time, so the kids could change them up. The backyard turned into a fun zone, with games and snacks and tons of friends. Karen's house stayed quiet, and her perfect yard stayed boring. She didn't fit in with the fun anymore, and that was just fine with everyone. Justice was served, and it was sweet like Sarah's cookies. Karen had tried to scare Jake, trick him, and boss him around. But she'd picked the wrong guy. He was a cop, he was smart, and he loved his kid. The Playhouse wasn't just a toy now, it was a win. A big, happy win for Jake, Timmy, and all of Maple Street. So, there you have it, friends. That's the whole wild story about Jake, Timmy, and that nosy neighbor, Karen. She thought she could boss everyone around on Maple Street, didn't she? She walked around with her clipboard, her loud voice, and her grumpy face, acting like she was the queen of everything. She saw Timmy's little playhouse, that cute one with the red roof and blue curtains, and decided it had to go. She didn't care that Timmy loved it. She didn't care that Jake worked hard to build it. All she cared about was her rules she even made up sometimes. She thought she could scare Jake, trick him, and win. She thought calling the cops would be her big move. But oh boy, she didn't see the truth coming. Not at all. Karen was loud. Super loud. She yelled at Jake, stomped her feet, and waved her arms like she was in charge of the whole world. She acted like she had all the power, like she could snap her fingers and make anything happen. But guess what? Sometimes, the people who act the loudest, the ones who shout and fuss the most, don't really have much to stand on. Karen's big plan crashed because she didn't know who Jake was. She didn't know he was a cop, a real one, with friends on the police force. She didn't know the HOA would check her silly rules and say, nope, the Playhouse is fine. All her noise and fussing? It didn't mean a thing when the truth came out. She looked silly, and Jake? He stayed cool and calm the whole time. That's the funny thing about this story. Jake didn't yell back at Karen. He didn't stomp his feet or wave his fists. He didn't need to. He was quiet, super quiet, but he had the real strength. He knew what was right. He knew the Playhouse wasn't hurting anyone. And he knew he could handle whatever Karen threw at him. Even when she called the cops, he just smiled and shook their hands. He didn't have to make a big show. He didn't have to prove anything to her. He just stood there, steady and strong, and let the truth do the talking. And in the end, that's what won. The quiet guy beat the loud lady, and Timmy's Playhouse stayed right where it was. Think about that for a second. Have you ever met someone like Karen? Maybe not a neighbor with a clipboard, but someone who's loud and bossy, always telling everyone what to do. Maybe it's a kid at school who thinks they're the boss of the playground. Or maybe it's a grown-up who acts like they know everything. They talk big, they act big, but sometimes they're just full of hot air, like a balloon that pops when you poke it. And then there's people like Jake. The quiet ones. The ones who don't brag or shout, but they're strong inside. They do what's right, they help their friends, and they don't let the loud people push them around. That's real power, isn't it? Not the noisy kind, but the steady kind. What do you think? Would you have stood up to Karen if you were Jake? Picture it: you've got a cool playhouse you built for your kid, and some grumpy lady comes stomping over, telling you to tear it down. Would you yell back? Would you run away? Or would you stay calm like Jake and let her figure out she's wrong? It's not easy to stand up to someone loud, especially when they're mad and waving a clipboard in your face. But Jake did it. He didn't let her scare him. He didn't let her ruin Timmy's fun. He just kept going, quiet and strong, until she had to back off. That takes guts. Big guts. This story makes you think about other stuff too. Like how sometimes people judge things too fast. Karen looked at that playhouse and decided it was ugly and bad, just because it wasn't her idea of perfect. She didn't stop to think about Timmy, or how happy it made him. She didn't care that it was a kid's toy, Not a big problem. She just saw what she wanted to see and got mad about it. Ever had that happen to you? Maybe you made something cool like a drawing or a fort and someone said it was dumb without even looking close. It's not fun, right? But Jake showed us something important. He didn't let Karen's quick judging win. He stuck to what he knew was right, and he proved her wrong. That's a good lesson. Don't let someone's loud words knock you down when you know you're okay. And Timmy? Oh, Timmy's the real star here. He didn't even know all the drama was happening half the time. He just kept playing, laughing, and being a kid. When Karen was yelling, he was swinging his stick at dragons. When the cops showed up, he thought it was cool, not scary. And when it was all over, he ran right back to his playhouse like nothing happened. That's pretty awesome, isn't it? He didn't let Karen's grumpiness steal his fun. He just kept being Timmy, happy, brave, and full of big ideas. Maybe we can all be a little like that. Keep doing what we love, even when someone loud tries to stop us. Let's talk about Maple Street for a minute too. After all this mess with Karen, the neighborhood got better. Way better. The Playhouse turned into the coolest spot around. Kids from all over came to play with Timmy. Knights, pirates, princesses, you name it. They laughed and ran and made up stories under that red roof. The grown ups started talking more too. They'd wave at Jake, bring over snacks, and say nice things about the Playhouse. Even old Mrs. Jenkins, who never left her house much, came by with muffins. Karen's big fuss ended up bringing everyone together, everyone except her, that is. She stayed in her house, quiet and grumpy, while the rest of the street had fun. Funny how that works, huh? Sometimes the person who tries to ruin things ends up making them better for everyone else. So, what's the big takeaway here? What's the thing to remember when this story's done? Maybe it's this: don't be afraid of the loud people. They might sound big, they might act tough, but that doesn't mean they're right. And don't be afraid to be the quiet one either. You don't have to shout or fight to be strong. You can stand up for what's good like Jake did for Timmy's Playhouse and let the truth do the rest. It's okay to be calm. It's okay to be steady. That's where real strength lies. Not in yelling or bossing, but in knowing who you are and sticking to it. What do you think about all this? Would you have stood up to Karen? Would you have kept your cool like Jake, or maybe told her off a little louder? There's no wrong answer, it's just fun to imagine. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you'd do if you were in Jake's shoes. Or maybe tell me about a time you stood up to someone bossy. I'd love to hear your stories. And hey, if you liked this one, if it made you laugh or cheer or think, give it a big thumbs up, okay? It's a wild ride, and I'm glad you came along. This isn't the end forever, you know. There's more stories out there, more adventures to tell. Maple Street's just one little place, but it's full of surprises. Maybe next time we'll hear about Timmy and his night friends, or maybe some other neighbor will stir up trouble. Who knows? Stick around, and we'll find out together. See you in the next one, friends. Keep being strong, quiet or loud, it's up to you.